In the year 2234, Earth had finally expanded its reach beyond the solar system, establishing colonies on distant planets and interacting with alien civilizations. Among these, the serene world of Viridia stood out, known for its lush landscapes and the Viridians, a species whose society was remarkably similar to humanity's past matriarchal structures. The Viridians were peaceful, artistic, and profoundly integrated with nature. However, the tranquility of Viridia concealed a looming disaster. A mysterious plague, known as the Scourge, had swept across their planet. It targeted only the male Viridians, whose genetic makeup seemed to succumb entirely to the virulent pathogen. Within a few Earth months, the male population of Viridia was decimated, leaving the females in despair and the societal structure in jeopardy. Amid this chaos, the Viridian High Council, comprised entirely of females, convened an emergency meeting. The council was desperate. Their species faced potential extinction if they could not find a solution. After extensive deliberation, they decided to reach out to their human allies, whom they had discreetly observed and studied for decades. Earth, meanwhile, was oblivious to the Viridians' plight. The humans had their struggles, grappling with the consequences of overpopulation and climate crises. It was during this tumultuous period that one human, Jake Mercer, a young biologist and explorer, found himself unwittingly at the center of an interstellar drama. Jake had been part of a scientific expedition to study the adaptability of Earth's flora and fauna on new planets. The mission had taken him to the fringes of human-colonized space, where he had heard rumors of the Viridian plague but paid little heed, focused as he was on his research. One evening, as the crimson sun dipped below the horizon of the planet he was on, Jake's communicator beeped with an urgent message. It was a cryptic summon from the Viridian High Council, requesting his immediate presence. With curiosity and a hint of unease, Jake prepared for a journey that would take him directly into the eye of the storm. Arriving on Viridia, Jake was struck by the stark contrast between the planet's beauty and the palpable sense of loss that hung in the air. He was quickly escorted to the council chambers, a grand structure built around an ancient tree that seemed to pulse with life. The chamber was filled with female Viridians, their expressions etched with worry and determination. The council leader, a distinguished elder named Lyra, addressed Jake with a voice both commanding and pleading. "Jake Mercer, we have observed you and your species, noting your resilience and your reproductive capacities. You are perhaps our last hope. We need your help to save our people from extinction." Jake, taken aback by the gravity of the request and the burden suddenly thrust upon him, took a moment to respond. "I'm just a scientist," he said slowly, "but I will do what I can to help. What exactly are you asking of me?" Lyra explained that the Viridians had the technology to adapt their reproductive methods, but they lacked vital genetic diversity. "We need a partner from another race, one not affected by the scourge, to help us rebuild our population. Your involvement would be instrumental," she said, carefully measuring her words. As Jake processed the enormity of his role in this unprecedented situation, he realized that his mission had changed completely. No longer just a researcher, he was now a key player in a desperate strategy to save a civilization. The weight of this responsibility was immense, but so was the opportunity to forge a bond between humans and Viridians that could last for generations. Understanding the stakes, Jake agreed to cooperate, setting in motion events that would forever alter the course of two species. As the first chapter of this interstellar saga closed, the future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. The hunt for survival was on, and it transcended planets, species, and the very fabric of known existence. As dawn broke over the verdant canopies of Viridia, Jake ventured into the heart of the planet's research complex, accompanied by Lyra and a team of Viridian scientists. The facility was a blend of natural Viridian architecture and cutting-edge technology, reflecting the harmonious existence they strive for between their culture and their scientific ambitions. Inside the main lab, a vast array of biotechnological equipment hummed with activity. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the undercurrents of floral pheromones, which the Viridians used to communicate subtly. Jake observed the scientists at work. their movements precise and their expressions focused. Lyra guided him to a secluded area where the core of their reproductive technology was housed. "This is the Genesis chamber," she announced, gesturing towards a large, cylindrical tank filled with a luminescent, life-supporting gel. Suspended within, embryos were in various stages of development, each illuminated by a soft, pulsing light. "We've managed to preserve these with our existing genetic resources, but without new genetic variants, they will not survive past early development," one of the lead scientists, Mira, explained. She was younger than Lyra, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Your DNA could provide the diversity these embryos need to thrive." Jake approached the tank, his reflection distorted in the curved glass. "How would my contribution work, technically speaking?" he asked, his curiosity piqued by both the ethical and scientific dimensions of the task. Mira activated a holographic display, which illustrated the genetic integration process. "We employ a method called adaptive genetic synthesis. It allows us to blend DNA sequences in a controlled environment, ensuring compatibility and enhancing survival traits. Your DNA would be sequenced and then introduced into selected embryos here," she detailed, pointing to a sequence where genetic strands merged seamlessly in a dance of biological harmony. The process fascinated Jake, but it also raised profound questions about identity and legacy. "And the children born from this process, what will their status be? Human? Viridian? Something new?" "That is a question we too are contemplating," Lyra interjected thoughtfully. "They would be a bridge between our worlds, not one or the other but both. A new hope for a future where our species not only survive but flourish together." Jake nodded, understanding the magnitude of what was being proposed. He was not just contributing to a scientific experiment. He was potentially fathering a new lineage that would carry the heritage of two distinct cultures. As the days progressed, Jake worked closely with the Viridian team, learning their methods and contributing his own expertise in human genetics. Together, they refined the synthesis process, enhancing the compatibility and ensuring that the hybrid embryos developed robustly. Simultaneously, news of the collaboration began to spread, stirring a mix of hope, skepticism, and awe across Viridia and the human colonies. Debates raged about the ethical implications, the long-term effects on both species, and the socio-political ramifications of such a union. Meanwhile, Jake found himself increasingly immersed in Viridian culture. He learned their language, their social norms, and their philosophical views on life and existence. The Viridians, in turn, grew fond of Jake, respecting his dedication and his unwavering commitment to their cause. However, as the first successful hybrid embryos reached a viable stage, a new challenge loomed. Not all were content with this daring leap into the genetic unknown. A faction among the Viridians, led by a charismatic and influential figure, Saran, began to voice opposition. They called for purity of species and feared the loss of their identity in the wake of such profound change. As tensions rose, Jake and the Viridian scientists prepared for the first birthing ceremony, a pivotal moment that would test the strength of their work and the unity of their intentions. Little did they know, the real trial was just beginning, as forces both within and beyond their control started to move against them, threatening to unravel everything they had striven to achieve. The birthing ceremony was set in the Grove of Beginnings, a sacred site on Viridia where the life force of the planet was believed to be strongest. The air was filled with a symphony of bioluminescent colors as the Viridians celebrated the potential birth of a new era. Yet, beneath the surface, unease stirred, fueled by Saran's dissenting voice, which had spread among certain factions. Jake stood beside Lyra and Mira, watching as the Genesis chamber was carefully transported to the site. It was a solemn moment, marked by ancient rituals adapted to welcome these unprecedented new lives. The Viridian High Priestess began the ceremony, invoking the blessings of their ancestors and the life force of Viridia itself. As the ceremony progressed, Jake felt the weight of eyes upon him, some filled with hope, others with skepticism. He knew that regardless of the outcome, the impact would ripple across both their worlds. The chamber pulsated gently, signaling the commencement of the birthing process. All fell silent, watching as the first of the hybrid embryos was gently transitioned from the artificial environment of the Genesis chamber to the nurturing grounds prepared in the grove. The embryo, encased in a transparent, nutrient-rich sac, began to show signs of life, stirring gently as it adapted to its new environment. Mira monitored the vital signs, announcing in a tense whisper that the initial signs were positive. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by a loud disruption from the back of the gathering. Siran and her followers emerged, their expressions fierce and their intentions clear. "This is unnatural, and we cannot condone what threatens to dilute the essence of our people," Siran declared loudly, her voice carrying across the grove. Lyra stepped forward, her demeanor calm yet assertive. "This is our path to survival, Siran. We cannot cling to what was when it means the end of our existence. These children will be Viridian as much as they are human." The confrontation escalated as more of Siran's supporters voiced their dissent. The air crackled with tension, a palpable divide splitting the assembly. Jake, feeling a protective surge, moved to shield the birthing area. "These children, they haven't chosen to be born into this conflict. They represent not just survival, but the possibility of understanding and integration between our kinds." He addressed the crowd, his voice steady. The priestess, seeing the potential for violence, raised her arms, and a deep, resonant tone filled the air, quieting the crowd. "Let us witness the outcome," she proposed. "Let the life that emerges guide our actions." Reluctantly, Siran nodded, and her group backed down, though their eyes remained wary and watchful. The tension broke momentarily as the first hybrid child made its way into the world, a delicate cry piercing the charged air. The child was a beautiful amalgam of human and Viridian traits. Its skin bore the soft green hues of Viridian genetics, and its eyes, large and expressive, mirrored human emotion. The crowd was mesmerized, their conflicts momentarily forgotten in the face of such innocence and promise. Murmurs of wonder spread through the assembly as two more children were successfully born, each unique yet undeniably a blend of both species. Jake, overcome with a mix of relief and joy, looked over the newborns. "They're the future, aren't they?" he whispered to Lyra, who nodded, her eyes moist with emotion. However, the respite was brief. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Siran approached Jake. Her expression was complex, a mix of resignation and unresolved anger. "This isn't over, human. The consequences of your actions will unfold in ways you cannot foresee." With those parting words, she turned and left, leaving a lingering sense of foreboding. Jake knew this was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. As he looked down at the sleeping hybrids, he realized that their fight for acceptance and survival was just starting, and he would need all his strength to protect these new lives in a world that was still grappling with what they represented. The first few months following the birthing ceremony were a critical period of adaptation, not only for the hybrid children, but for both Viridian and human societies as news of their existence spread. The children, named collectively as the Navieri, symbolizing the new bond between the races, grew rapidly, exhibiting a blend of traits that hinted at their dual heritage. Under the careful supervision of Jake and Mira, the Navieri demonstrated remarkable cognitive and physical developments. Their ability to assimilate information was astounding, and they showed early signs of understanding complex linguistic patterns from both human and Viridian languages. However, the existence of the Navieri wasn't without complications. On Earth, debates erupted among scientific communities and ethical boards, questioning the ramifications of interspecies genetics. In parallel, the Viridian society was split. While many embraced the Navieri as symbols of hope, others, swayed by Siran's rhetoric, viewed them with suspicion and fear, considering them an aberration from the natural order. To mitigate the rising tensions, Lyra proposed a series of public engagements where the communities could interact with the Navieri in controlled environments. The intention was to foster understanding and acceptance through interaction. Jake was at the forefront of these sessions, often cradling a Navieri child in his arms as he spoke of unity and shared futures. During one such event, held in a large communal hall decked with both human and Viridian cultural symbols, a significant incident unfolded. As Jake addressed the gathering, explaining the genetic science behind the Navieri's existence, a group of dissenters led by Saran stormed the stage. They demanded the cessation of what they called the tainting of Viridian purity. The situation escalated quickly, with security forces intervening to prevent violence. Amid the chaos, one of the Navieri children, Tia'an, exhibited an unexpected and extraordinary ability. Sensing the aggressive emotions, Tia'an emitted a high-pitched tone that immediately calmed the agitated crowd. Both humans and Viridians froze, their anger dissipating as the soothing sound enveloped them. This incident, widely broadcasted, became a pivotal moment in the Navieri narrative. People began to realize that these children were not only a blend of two species, but also bearers of potentially peace-promoting abilities. This revelation shifted public opinion significantly, with many of the previously undecided Viridians beginning to view the Navieri as potential mediators of peace and understanding. Encouraged by this development, Lyra and Jake intensified their efforts to integrate the Navieri into society, setting up educational programs that catered to their unique needs and abilities. The programs were designed not only to educate the Navieri, but also to teach both human and Viridian children about each other's cultures and languages. However, the underlying tensions had not completely dissipated. Saran and her followers retreated into the shadows, plotting ways to undermine the growing influence of the Navieri. They began to rally like-minded extremists, forming a clandestine group dedicated to preserving what they called the old ways. As the first anniversary of the Navieri's birth approached, security around the integration programs was quietly tightened. Jake, now deeply bonded to the children and their future, found himself at the center of a complex web of politics, scientific curiosity, and ideological battles. He often spent nights walking through the bioluminescent forests of Viridia, pondering the future. His thoughts were a mix of wonder at the Navieri's potential and concern over the resistance they faced. It was during one of these walks that Jake encountered Saran, not as a hostile force, but in a rare moment of vulnerability. Saran, who had been observing the Navieri from afar, confessed her fears to Jake. "I fear for our identity, our history," she said, her voice softening. "But seeing that child calm a storm of anger, it makes me wonder if there's another path." This unexpected admission from Saran hinted at the possibility of a reconciliation, but Jake knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The future of the Navieri and the coexistence of two distinct yet increasingly connected species hung delicately in the balance. The integration programs, though initially small-scale and experimental, began to show significant promise. The Navieri, as they grew, developed abilities that seemed to combine the best of both human and Viridian characteristics. Their capacity for empathy was particularly strong, a trait that facilitated unexpected bridges between contentious groups. At the heart of these programs was a facility called the Harmony Institute, located on the outskirts of one of Viridia's major cities. The architecture of the institute was a symbolic blend of Earth and Viridian aesthetics, featuring both the angular metallic structures of human design and the organic flowing lines of Viridian architecture. It had become a focal point for those interested in the future of interspecies cooperation. Jake spent much of his time at the institute, working alongside Viridian educators and scientists to develop a curriculum that catered to the unique needs of the Navieri. He was particularly involved in a project designed to harness the unique abilities of the Navieri for medical purposes, exploring how their innate empathic abilities could be used to soothe and heal. One day, as Jake was overseeing a session where Navieri children interacted with patients suffering from severe emotional distress, he received an urgent communication from Lyra. She summoned him to a private meeting, her message terse and laden with urgency. Upon arriving at Lyra's office, Jake found her in conference with several high-ranking members of the Viridian Security Council. The atmosphere was tense, the room filled with hushed, serious tones. Lyra greeted him with a nod, her expression grave. "We have a situation," she began once the room had been secured against eavesdropping. "Saran's faction has been quiet recently, too quiet. Our intelligence suggests they're planning something significant, something that could endanger the peace we're working to build. Jake listened intently as Lyra detailed the intelligence reports. Saran and her followers had been seen congregating in remote areas of Viridia, engaging in secretive activities that hinted at preparations for a large-scale operation. We believe they may be planning to strike at the Harmony Institute, Lyra continued, her voice firm. It's become a symbol of everything they oppose. We can't let them disrupt this work, not when we're starting to see real progress. The decision was made to increase security around the Institute without alarming the community. Jake was asked to continue his work but to remain vigilant. As he left the meeting, his mind raced with the implications of what they were facing. The thought of the Navieri being targeted was particularly distressing. They were still children, despite their extraordinary abilities, and they deserved a chance to grow up free from fear. Over the following weeks, Jake observed increased security patrols around the Institute's perimeter, and more stringent checks on those coming in and out. The children were aware of the changes, their sensitivity making them acutely aware of the heightened tensions. Jake and the Viridian educators worked hard to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the strain was palpable. One evening, as the crimson sun cast long shadows over the grounds of the Institute, Jake was walking with Tia-An, now one of the oldest Navieri children, along a path lined with glowing plants. Tia-An, who had always been perceptive beyond his years, looked up at Jake with a serious expression. "Jake, why are people angry? Why do they want to hurt us?" he asked, his voice tinged with genuine curiosity and concern. Jake sighed, struggling to find words that would explain the complexities of fear and resistance to change. "Sometimes, Tia-An, people fear what they don't understand. They're scared of changes that they can't control. But remember, many people love and support us. We're working to show everyone that there's nothing to fear, that change can bring something beautiful." Tia-An nodded, seeming to digest this. "I will show them. We can make things better," he said resolutely, a spark of determination in his eyes. Jake smiled, encouraged by Tian's optimism. As they continued their walk, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges were immense, but the potential for a better future was real and worth every effort. Little did he know the test of their resolve was closer than he imagined, and it would come in a form none of them expected. As the days shortened and the shadows grew longer on Viridia, the quiet unease around the Harmony Institute intensified. Jake and the team had managed to maintain a routine, but the air was thick with anticipation, as if everyone sensed the storm on the horizon. Saran's silence was unnerving, a palpable absence of noise before the inevitable eruption. On a particularly brisk morning, alarms shattered the pre-dawn stillness. Jake, who had been up reviewing data on the Navieri's progress, rushed out to see the source of the commotion. The security perimeter had been breached. Surveillance feeds showed a group of figures moving stealthily towards the main buildings. It was Saran's faction, unmistakable in their purpose, armed and determined. Without hesitation, Jake coordinated with the security team, directing the evacuation of the Navieri to underground shelters specifically designed for such emergencies. As the children were ushered away, their faces etched with confusion and fear, Jake couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness. The Viridian security forces engaged the intruders, trying to neutralize the threat before anyone could reach the Institute's vital areas. Meanwhile, Jake stayed close to the shelters, ensuring all the Navieri were accounted for. Amidst the chaos, Tia-An tugged at his sleeve, his expression calm despite the surrounding turmoil. "Jake, I can help," he said, his young voice steady. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, perplexed. "I can calm them like I did before. Maybe they will listen," Tia-An responded, his eyes reflecting a maturity far beyond his years. Jake hesitated, the risks enormous. Yet he saw the resolve in Tia-An's eyes and nodded. Together they approached the surface, finding a safe vantage point near the conflict zone. Tia-An closed his eyes, concentrating deeply. A few moments later, a soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, weaving through the sounds of conflict. As the hum intensified, the combatants began to falter, their movements slowing, expressions softening. Saran, leading her group, stopped in her tracks, her face contorted in confusion and then realization as she spotted Tian. "Why do you stop us?" Saran called out, her voice carrying over the now subdued battlefield. "We want peace, not fear. Not anger," Tian replied, his voice amplified so all could hear. "We are not your enemies. We are Viridia, just like you." The standoff that followed was tense, with both sides watching each other warily. Jake stood by Tian, ready to protect him if needed. After what felt like an eternity, Saran lowered her weapon, her followers following suit. "Perhaps we were wrong," Saran said, her voice uncertain. "Perhaps there is a place for new ways after all." In the days that followed, a tenuous peace settled over Viridia. The crisis had sparked a significant shift in public opinion, with many of Saran's supporters reconsidering their stance. The bravery and unique abilities of the Navieri, particularly Tian's act of courage, became a symbol of hope and unity for both Viridians and humans. Under the watchful eyes of both their communities, the Navieri continued to grow, their roles as ambassadors of peace becoming more defined. Jake, witnessing their development and the gradual changes in society, felt a profound sense of accomplishment and optimism. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the foundations were laid for a future where humans and Viridians could coexist in mutual respect and harmony. As he walked through the now peaceful grounds of the Harmony Institute, watching the Navieri play and learn, Jake knew that while this chapter of their story might be concluding, the saga of their interstellar kinship was just beginning. Their shared destiny, woven from strands of courage, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to coexistence, held the promise of a brighter future for all.